to have with the audience after my presentation. So why is coordination such an important challenge that we're devoting a full symposium to it? I would say that the main reason is that the problems, the most pressing public problems we face are multidimensional. But by that I mean that they're caused by multiple factors, all reinforcing each other's, and therefore no one single intervention will be able to substantially improve or resolve those challenges. So a community is deprived, it's probably facing a public safety problem, but it's also probably facing lack of jobs and opportunities, poor infrastructure and services, lack of social capital and civic engagement, and so on and so on. And all these factors are very much tied to each other and reinforcing each other in producing this deprivation to the community. And the same happens at the individual level. You know, for example, an at-risk teenager has probably left school. So could we get him back by a school retention program? Maybe, but that kid may have left school because he had to work, or he had a health condition that could not be treated at the local hospital, or he has a substance addiction problem, or he comes from a very complex home situation. So there are a number of factors that put him at risk, and it's very unlikely that one single intervention will change that situation. And yet, despite this, that at this point I think it's well known by now, despite this, our interventions from the government continue to be often separate, vertical, siloed intervention led by different ministries or agencies according to their own planning, timetables, resources, etc. So we have a mismatch between the horizontality of the problems and the vertical nature of our most useful responses. And for that reason, I think in the last few years, you see this renewed interest in joined-up government, in holistic government, in horizontal management, in whole-of-government approaches. There are a number of terms that they all refer to the same problem of making ministries and agencies work better together. Of course, in any large organization, as the national government is, you're going to have some form of division of labor. You know, and this is not only inevitable, but in some ways positive as well, because it enables to develop specific expertise, sectoral expertise in the different ministries, because it allows these ministries to have clear visions and mandates and beneficiaries to which they need to respond to, because it enables political and legal accountability, because this way we know who is responsible for what and we can hold them accountable, because it facilitates budget management and execution. So there are a number of reasons why not only you need to have division of labor, but you want to have division of labor in government. At the same time, a lack of coordination is harmful. First, because it probably leads to a duplication of efforts and investment of resources to tackle a problem. Second, because it sometimes may lead to contradictory interventions and inconsistent government objectives. So, for example, this actual picture from a Latin American city, you see that the city's Department of Transportation built a tunnel that was not high enough for the city's ambulances run by the city's Department of Health to go through there. So clearly, these two departments were not talking to each other, were not consulting with each other, and for all these reasons, you eventually end up with very little impact on the outcomes you're trying to improve. You know? So division of labor is necessary, but coordination is also necessary. What can we do in the face of this problematic? I think there are two main options I want to refer to today. The first one has to do with reorganizing the structure of government, and the second one has to do with strengthening the institutions and units and teams at the center of government. So the first one has to do with a consolidation or reorganization of government entities by placing multiple separate ministries, agencies, programs even under the same umbrella. You know, creating a super ministry or coordinating department responsible for many tasks. And this you see in a number of countries. In the US, so the interpretation why the 9/11 attacks could happen and why the government could not prevent them was that the different intelligence and security agencies were not sharing information and coordinating with each other. So after 2002, what you see is that the US government created a Department of Homeland Security and placed most of these intelligence agencies under the same leadership with the goal precisely of improving how they work together. In Latin America, where social inclusion is a challenge in most countries, what you see is a number of cases in which they have established a coordinating ministry, either for the social sector entirely, health, education, social development, etc., or for specific populations within this social sector, like early childhood. But at the same time, the evidence about the effectiveness of these super ministries is limited. And the main reason for this is that you're basically moving around the source of the complexity. Beforehand, you had a prime minister or a president having to coordinate separate ministries or agencies, and now you have all those agencies within one ministry. So it's not a prime ministerial problem anymore, but it's a problem for the minister that needs to make them work together. So the problem remains as before, only moved to the sub-cabinet level. And it also creates potentially new challenges. These very expanded ministries may lack clear missions, or they have contradictory missions, and that has been shown to harm their performance. And at the same time, it may slow up processes, because each decision, each policy needs to be reviewed and approved by several layers, and you end up slowing things up. So I'd say the consensus on this approach is not very positive. The alternative approach, which I think holds more promise, is to strengthen the institutions at the center of government, which have precisely the mission to improve coordination across the government. And they are, in a way, ideally placed for this because they don't have their own sectoral territory or turf to protect. They have a whole of government vision and approach and interest, and therefore they can play the role of honest brokers in arbitrating across ministries. And they also usually have very high-level political backing. They report directly to the prime minister, and therefore they are empowered vis-a-vis other ministries and agencies to lead coordination efforts. And that's why I think also in recent years, and including by the IDB, you see an effort to better understand how to improve the work of the central government. There are a number of possible tools available to the center of government, but I want to focus on three of them. First is to ensure that all these ministries and agencies share the same priorities. Second is to establish mechanisms for coordination, for decision-making and for arbitration when disagreements arise. And thirdly, it's conducting joint monitoring sessions to know how things are going and to unblock obstacles with every ministry and agency involved in the delivery chain for whichever outcome we're concentrated on. So the first one I think will be very much of interest to PIOJ, and I know you're doing some of these efforts. It has to do with leading the strategic management or planning efforts within the government to ensure that each ministerial or sectoral plan is consistent and that all these plans are aligned to the priorities set by the Prime Minister and the Cabinet, and therefore there's a coherence in government plans. You also have the possibility to establish joint planning efforts across multiple ministries. For example, in the US, since a few years ago, you have these cross-agency priority goals in which multiple departments contribute to. In the UK, a few years back, when they had the public service agreements, After 2007, they established sort of the cross-ministerial public service agreements, and you had multiple departments contributing to the same goal under the coordination and monitoring of the cabinet office. And for these shared goals, you can even have what I call joint delivery chains. So for example, as you see in the slide, in the state of New South Wales in Australia, for certain priorities of the Prime Minister of the state, you have a very explicit realization that the interventions need to be coordinated across multiple ministries. So in that example, you have the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Sport, and a third minister contributing to a shared goal of promoting active kids and a healthy lifestyle for kids. So this is a way to produce coordination by making sure that all the different ministries and agencies are working towards the same goal. Then you have the classic center of government mechanisms of the interministerial committees or task force, or even sometimes the ministers without portfolio, like in the US, where you have the SAR, you know, this person very much empowered without his or her own portfolio, but with the mandate to bring together all the entities that need to contribute to a goal. So for example, Joe Biden's new chief of staff was Obama's Ebola SAR, the person who President Obama put in charge of coordinating the machinery of government behind the response to the Ebola crisis. Of course, the risk with this approach is having too many coordinating committees or task forces, because you end up with lower level people attending them. Ministers or deputy ministers don't have time to attend all these bodies, and therefore they can't act as really decision-making bodies. Second, if we're coordinating all day, who is implementing? You know, there's a thing like too much coordination. And finally, as in the example you have on the screen, you can have a problem of who coordinates the coordinators. You know? This is from a few years back, but these were all the cross-ministerial committees and task forces set up by the US government during the Obama presidency for coordinating the responses to climate change. And as you can see, it's sort of a labyrinth, and who's in charge of this, where is accountability? It's very much a complicated question. So therefore, you need to be aware that there's a thing as too much coordination, or too many coordinating bodies. And finally, and this is typically associated with delivery units, you can have stocktakes or monitoring sessions, data-driven sessions for the government's leadership and senior managers to review how things are going, make sure everybody's on the same page, make sure every ministry and agency that contributes to the same goal is present at the room, so nobody can pass the buck or the blame to someone who's absent. And we review how things are going, and everybody's at the room, and therefore with the discipline and systematic repetition of these sessions, you get everybody to work together and solve problems when you need multiple ministries to contribute. This is an actual picture from the sessions we led in Buenos Aires, Argentina, for certain cross-ministerial goals, for example, like reducing violence in sports events, where multiple ministries had to contribute to, and where we could track how things were going. For example, as you see there, in each stadium within the city, to know where the problems were and where we need to focus our resources, our attention, and our problem-solving efforts to make things better. So to sum up, a few final lessons, so we have a few minutes for Q&A. First, the center of government has a number of tools available to promote coordination, but at the same time, we need to make sure that coordination within the center of government is clear and working well. Sometimes too many units appear at the center of government, are created to solve specific problems, and then you have a coordination problem within the center of government. So clear mandates, clear roles and responsibilities for each unit within the center of government is critical for this, especially because if not, you end up overloading the sector ministries or the line ministries with too many requests, too many coordinating bodies to attend. So first you need to make sure that your center of government is coordinated within. Second, as I said before, there's an issue of prioritization. You cannot expect to coordinate every activity that every ministry and agency is doing. You need to focus on high-level outcomes, priority outcomes, those that will be the legacy of the prime minister, of the administration, and there you need to focus your coordination efforts and avoid this proliferation of bodies and instances for coordination. Third, I think the experience shows that the center of government needs both the political mandate, the political backing from the highest authority, and also the technical and the managerial capabilities to run these sessions and to implement these tools that we're just discussing. If you lack any of these two tools or components of the center of government, you will not be effective. Certainly you need both. Fourth, sometimes we think of planning, coordination, monitoring as separate functions, and in a way they are, and analytically we should study them separately, but they need to be integrated. So when you plan, you need to take into account the need for shared objectives of joint delivery chains, for example. When you coordinate, you need to refer to your plans. When you monitor, you need to refer to the KPIs or the indicators that were set in your planning instances. So even if different center of government units lead these separate functions, they need to be integrated and very much coordinating among each other. Fifth, I think one lesson for the center of government is that the spotlight belongs to the prime ministers and to the ministers. They are the ones who deliver, who get the credit, who reach the goals. The center of government there is to support, to unblock obstacles, to help coordinate, but certainly it's not to compete for the spotlight. Six, there's always a tension at the center of government between being an honest broker and between directing policy. When you're an honest broker, you try to arbitrate differences, to intermediate, to reach a consensus, but without pushing for a specific policy solution. When you are directing policy, you are certainly driving the process towards a certain decision. And coordination needs a bit of both, and it's not always easy to draw the line. So I think there's always some way of overlap of certain confusion in a way when you're coordinating cross-government, and you need to understand this and be aware of this, but you won't be able to get away with this this situation. And finally, this presentation has been very much focused on the managerial and technical tools for coordination, but the internal culture of the government, the values, the attitudes, the norms, the behaviors that are prevalent in government are critical. I think some of their presentations will focus on this, and certainly you can have the best managerial processes, but if your culture goes in the other direction and does not promote coordination and sharing information with other ministers, you certainly will not be able to succeed. So coordination needs these managerial tools that we just been discussing, but it also needs an internal culture that promotes this attitude of working together with other ministers. I'll stop there, so we have a few minutes for Q&A and discussion, and thank you very much again for this invitation.